In this session, we will explore the fundamental concepts of variables and operators in PHP. Understanding these concepts is essential for writing dynamic and efficient PHP programs. Let's begin by discussing what a variable is. In PHP, a variable is simply a container used to store data, such as numbers, text, or arrays, which can be used and modified throughout your script. Every variable in PHP starts with a $sign, followed by its name. The name of a variable can include letters, numbers, or underscores, but it cannot start with a number. Also, variable names in PHP are case-sensitive, meaning age, and age are considered two different variables. PHP is a loosely typed language, which means you don't need to declare a variable type before assigning a value. PHP automatically understands the type based on the value you provide. PHP supports several data types, each serving a specific purpose. The most common ones are string, used for text values; integer, used for whole numbers; float or double, used for decimal numbers; Boolean, which represents true or false; and array, which allows storing multiple values in one variable. There are also objects, which are instances of classes, and the null type, which represents a variable with no assigned value. These data types help PHP handle different kinds of information efficiently during execution. Next, let's talk about the scope of variables in PHP. The scope determines where a variable can be accessed or modified. There are three main types of scope: local, global, and static. A local variable is declared inside a function and can only be used within that function. On the other hand, a global variable is declared outside of all functions and can be accessed anywhere in the script. But to use it inside a function, you must explicitly declare it as global. A static variable, however, retains its value between multiple calls to the same function, meaning it doesn't reset every time the function runs. PHP also includes special built-in variables called superglobals, such as post, get, session, and server, which are automatically available in all scopes and are used to manage user input, sessions, and server data. Another important topic is the handling of regular expressions in PHP. Regular expressions, often called regex, are patterns used to search, match, and manipulate text. PHP provides functions like pre-ge-match to check if a pattern exists in a string, preg-match, all to find all matches, and preg-replace to replace specific text patterns. For example, you can use a regular expression to validate an email address, search for a keyword in a paragraph, or format user input. Regular expressions are a powerful way to control and analyze strings dynamically. Finally, let's explore operators in PHP, which are symbols used to perform operations on variables and values. There are several types of operators, each serving a unique role in programming logic. Arithmetic operators like plus, minus, multiply, divide, and modulus are used for basic mathematical calculations. Assignment operators help assign or modify variable values. Comparison operators compare two values and return true or false, such as checking if one number is greater than another. Logical operators like AND, OR, and NOT are used to combine multiple conditions in control statements. PHP also supports string operators, which allow you to join or concatenate text values, and increment and decrement operators, which increase or decrease variable values. In addition, array operators are used to compare or merge arrays, making them useful when handling collections of data. Variables and operators form the backbone of any PHP script. Variables allow you to store and manage data efficiently, while operators enable you to perform meaningful operations on that data. Understanding how data types work, how variable scope affects your code, and how to use regular expressions effectively will help you write cleaner and more functional PHP programs. Mastering these concepts is a crucial step toward becoming confident in PHP development. In PHP, any name or symbol that holds a value is known as a variable. When a variable is declared, it serves as a container that stores a specific value which can be retrieved and used at any point during the execution of a program. This makes variables one of the most essential components of PHP, as they enable data manipulation and dynamic behavior within scripts. Variables allow developers to store user input, process information, and display results efficiently without hard-coding values repeatedly. Alongside variables, operators play a vital role in PHP programming. Operators are symbols that perform actions on variables and values. For example, addition, comparison, or logical operations. Without operators, it would be impossible to perform calculations, make decisions, or process strings effectively in PHP. That is why both variables and operators are considered the backbone of PHP logic and computation. PHP also supports multiple data types, which define the kind of data a variable can hold. Whether it's a string of text, a whole number, a floating point value, or a collection of items in an array, PHP can manage all of them flexibly. This versatility allows developers to build programs that can handle a wide range of information dynamically. This session explains not only how to declare and use variables, but also discusses data types and the scope of variables in PHP, meaning where and how a variable can be accessed within a program. You will learn that every variable in PHP has a defined scope, such as local, global, or static, which determines its availability within different parts of the code. Furthermore, the session introduces the Portable Operating System Interface for Unix, or POSIX, which provides support for regular expressions in PHP. Regular expressions are powerful tools used to search, match, and manipulate text patterns, making them useful for tasks such as form validation and data filtering. Finally, the session gives a brief introduction to object-oriented programming, often referred to as OOP in PHP. Object-oriented programming allows developers to structure code into reusable objects that combine data and functionality together. This approach makes PHP applications more modular, maintainable, and easier to extend as projects grow. In short, this section connects all the foundational pieces: variables, data types, operators, scope, regular expressions, and object-oriented programming, to give you a complete understanding of how PHP handles data and operations behind the scenes. In PHP programming, variables are one of the most essential building blocks. A variable is used to store information or data that your program can use and modify at any time during execution. In simple words, it acts like a container that temporarily holds a value in the computer's memory. This value could be a number, a string of text, or even a more complex data structure like an array or object. Variables make PHP powerful because they allow developers to write dynamic programs. Instead of using fixed or hard-coded values, you can use variables to store user input, process calculations, or fetch information from a database, all while the program is running. In PHP, declaring a variable is simple. You start with a $sign, $, followed by the variable name. For example, Alex Braxer 10. Name, Huzaifa. In this example, X stores a numeric value, 10, and name stores a text string, Huzaifa. Once defined, these variables can be used anywhere in the program. For instance, you can print them, perform calculations, or concatenate them with other values. Behind the scenes, every variable in PHP is stored in memory. When the program runs, PHP automatically assigns memory space to hold that variable's value. As soon as the program finishes or the variable is no longer needed, PHP clears that memory. This process ensures efficient data management at runtime. Variables can store different types of data, such as numeric values, characters, text strings, and even memory addresses or results returned by functions. This flexibility allows developers to create complex, interactive applications, such as login systems, form handlers, and financial calculators, all by working with variables. In short, variables allow PHP to handle data dynamically. They help the program remember values, perform operations, and display results based on changing conditions. Without variables, a PHP program would be static and unable to respond to user input or real-time data. In PHP, every variable you create is linked to a specific type of data, and that type is known as a data type. The data type defines what kind of value the variable can hold, how it will be stored in memory, and what kind of operations can be performed on it. Unlike some other programming languages where you must declare the type of variable explicitly, PHP automatically determines the data type based on the value that you assign. This feature makes PHP a loosely typed language, which simplifies coding and reduces the chances of errors for beginners. For example, if you write emp number or 100, here, PHP automatically understands that the value 100 is an integer, and therefore, emp number becomes an integer variable. Similarly, if you later assign a text value to the same variable, such as emp number Huzaifa, a PHP will automatically treat it as a string. This flexibility allows developers to write cleaner and faster code without worrying about strict type declarations. PHP supports a wide range of data types. The most common ones include integers, which represent whole numbers, floating point numbers, which represent decimal or fractional values, and strings, which represent sequences of characters such as names or messages. There are also booleans that can store either true or false, arrays that can hold multiple values, and objects that represent more complex data structures used in object-oriented programming. The figure shown in this section, labeled as Figure 4.1, illustrates the concept of a variable using a cube labeled emp number. This cube represents a variable that stores the value 100, which is of type integer. The cube metaphor helps visualize how a variable holds a value in memory, ready to be used whenever the program needs it during runtime. PHP variables automatically adapt to the data type of the value assigned to them. Whether you're working with numbers, strings, or more complex data structures, PHP manages it internally to ensure your code runs smoothly. Understanding how PHP handles data types is crucial for writing efficient, error-free programs that can process and manipulate data effectively. When creating variables in PHP, there are a few important naming rules that must be followed. These rules help PHP understand your code correctly and prevent unexpected errors during execution. While some of these rules are similar to other programming languages, PHP also has its own unique conventions. First, every variable in PHP must begin with a $sign, followed by the variable name. For example, you can declare a variable as myvar or x. The basic syntax used to create a variable is variable name, value. This means you simply use the $sign, then write the name of your variable, followed by an equal sign and the value you want to assign. Another important rule is that variable names in PHP are case-sensitive. This means myvar and myvar are considered two completely different variables. Even slight changes in uppercase or lowercase letters make them unique. For instance, ABC, 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 and ABC are all treated as separate variables. Variable names must always start with a letter or an underscore and never with a number. This first character can be either uppercase or lowercase, and it can be followed by numbers or underscores. For example, myvar1 is a valid variable name, but 1myvar is not valid because it begins with a number. Variable names also cannot contain spaces. This means a name like first name would be invalid and cause an error. Instead, PHP allows you to use an underscore to represent a space. For example, first name. Similarly, special characters such as a or as cannot be used in variable names. Because PHP is a loosely typed language, you don't need to declare the type of variable before assigning a value. The PHP interpreter automatically detects what kind of data is being used, whether it's a number, text, or something else, and converts it internally to the appropriate data type. This feature makes PHP flexible and easy to work with, especially for beginners. Once a variable has been declared, it can be reused anywhere in the code. You can assign new values to it, update it, or use it in expressions and functions. The assignment operator, which is the equal sign, as, is used to give a value to a variable. For example, price. Chuck 100. Name, Jash Huzaifa. Here, the variable price stores a number and name stores a string. Both can be reused or modified later in the program. PHP variable naming follows a clear set of rules. They must begin with a $sign. Be case-sensitive, start with a letter or underscore, contain no spaces or special characters, and can be used dynamically without explicit data type declarations. Following these rules ensures that your code runs smoothly and avoids naming conflicts or syntax errors. In PHP, when a variable is declared inside a function, it is known as a local variable. Local variables are special because they only exist within the function where they are created. They are created when the function is called and destroyed when the function ends. This means that their value cannot be accessed or modified from outside that function. For example, consider the following code snippet. Function showNumber. Num, 5, echo num. In this example, num is a local variable. It belongs only to the showNumber function. When this function runs, PHP creates the variable num in memory, assigns it the value of 5, and then displays it using the echo statement. However, if you try to use num outside the showNumber function, for example, directly in the main program, PHP will produce an error because the variable does not exist outside the function's local scope. This concept is known as local scope. The local scope ensures that each function works independently with its own variables without interfering with variables from other parts of the program. This makes your code more secure, organized, and easier to manage. For instance, you can have multiple functions in a program, each using a variable with the same name. But since they are local, PHP treats them as completely separate entities. The figure shown in this section illustrates this clearly. It represents a function called showNumber, where a local variable num is defined and used inside the function. The highlighted label, local scope, emphasizes that the variable is confined to the function. It is not visible or usable elsewhere in the program. In short, local variables are temporary, isolated, and exist only during the function's execution. They play a crucial role in keeping data protected and preventing conflicts between variables in different parts of your code. Understanding local scope is the first step in mastering PHP's variable management system. In this example, we see a simple PHP function that demonstrates the concept of a local variable. Let's look at it line by line for better understanding. The code begins with the declaration of a function named test. Inside this function, a variable AX is created and assigned a value of 5. The line, X, or 5. Local scope means that X is a local variable which exists only inside the test function. It cannot be accessed or modified outside of this function. Next, the function contains a command to display the value of LX using the echo statement, echo, variable X inside function, at X. When this function is called, it will output the text, variable X inside function, 5 on the screen. This confirms that X is recognized and available within the function's local scope. After defining the function, it is called using test. This line executes the function, causing the value of OX to be printed as part of the function's output. However, notice what happens in the next part of the code. After the function call, there is another echo statement written outside the function. Echo, variable X outside function is X. Here, PHP will generate an error because X does not exist outside the test function. Once the function finishes executing, the local variable AX is destroyed, and PHP no longer keeps it in memory. So when the code tries to access AX from outside, the program fails to find it. This example clearly illustrates the principle of local scope. Variables declared inside a function are confined to that function and cannot be used anywhere else in the script. They are created when the function starts and deleted when it ends. In short, this code snippet shows that local variables are temporary and isolated. They help keep functions self-contained, prevent variable conflicts, and make your PHP code more modular and efficient. When we execute the PHP code shown in the previous snippet, we can clearly see how local variable scope works in practice. The first output line printed on the screen is variable x inside function is. This message confirms that the variable ax is accessible inside the function. When the function test runs, it creates the variable x with a value of 5, and the echo statement inside the function successfully displays that value. However, when the program tries to access the same variable ax outside the function, an error occurs. The message that follows shows a warning indicating that the variable ax is undefined outside the function. The output might look something like this. Warning: undefined variable ax in C, isxmpsaht.sns 4 bar p0.php on line 10. This warning means that PHP tried to find the variable ax in the main script but couldn't locate it because ax only exists within the function test. Once the function finishes executing, the variable ax is destroyed, and PHP frees up the memory it occupied. So, when the next line of code, echo variable x outside function is x, runs, PHP raises an error because it has no record of x outside the local scope. In short, this output verifies that variables declared inside a function are only available within that function and cannot be used anywhere else in the program. It's an essential concept that helps keep your code modular and prevents accidental interference between different parts of your program. This example is a practical demonstration of local scope in PHP. It clearly shows that each function in PHP has its own isolated environment where its local variables live temporarily, making the code more secure, predictable, and easy to debug. In the previous example, you saw that the variable ax was defined inside a function and could not be accessed outside of it. This image explains why that happens. When no value for the variable ax is declared outside the function, PHP will display an error if you try to use ax beyond the function's boundary. This is because variables created inside a function are recognized only within that function and nowhere else in the script. Such variables are called local variables, and they belong exclusively to the function in which they are declared. Once the function finishes executing, these variables are automatically destroyed and their memory space is released. This ensures that they don't interfere with variables used in other parts of the code. An interesting aspect of local variables is that you can use the same variable name in different functions without causing any conflict. For example, you might have one function that declares x arbor 5 and another that declares x secu 10. Even though the names are identical, PHP treats them as two completely separate variables because each one exists within its own local scope. On the other hand, a variable that is declared outside of all functions, known as a global variable, is entirely different from one declared inside a function, even if both share the same name. PHP keeps them separate to avoid confusion and to make sure that local and global data do not accidentally overlap. In simple terms, a local variable is private to the function it belongs to. It cannot be used or accessed outside that specific block of code. This design helps maintain clean, organized, and error-free programming, especially when multiple functions are working independently within a larger PHP script. And that brings us to the end of today's session on variables and operators in PHP. We explored how variables are used to store and manage data, how their scope defines where they can be accessed, and how local variables behave inside functions. We also saw practical examples that clearly demonstrated the difference between variables declared inside and outside a function. I hope this lesson helped you understand how PHP handles data internally and why mastering variables is such an important step in becoming a confident PHP developer. Thank you so much for watching Huzaifa TV Official. Stay informed, stay inspired, and keep learning new things every day. If you enjoyed this session, make sure to like the video, comment your thoughts, share it with others who are learning PHP, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future lessons. Join the Huzaifa TV Official family, where knowledge meets inspiration. See you in the next session.